All right, welcome. If anyone is there today to Learning Concrete 5 with Korvin and Myq. Without Korvin today. This is Season 1, Episode 3, and I'm doing it on my own, trying to manage all these different windows and stuff. Usually I'm hanging out in the background answering questions on Slack and stuff, but I'm doing it all on my own today. Korvin has a scheduling conflict, which we'll try to avoid in the future. So originally, we were going to discuss making packages and possibly themes and things like that, which I know has been asked for in the past. But I'm not an expert on that. So we're going to switch this up a little bit and talk about some things I do know a little bit about. Let me get this all set up here. Let's see, I remember we were going to set up a new channel for discussion, but I don't think we actually got around to that. So it looks like we're going to be using the town hall channel for today because I'm not seeing a new channel for our show. We'll get that fixed in the future. So yeah, if you have any questions, jump into the public Slack, concrete5 Slack, and go to the town hall channel, or if you can see another more appropriate channel, let me know in the town hall channel. I'll switch to that channel. But yeah, so today, like I said, Korvin is not here. So we're going to take a look at some more simple stuff and maybe just field some general Q&A and try to keep it light. This is more of a beginner's perspective. I'll give you a little background about myself. I'm more of an end user than a programmer. I do have a little bit of programming experience, and I've been getting into it more and more, but I'm more of an end user, and so I can provide you with that perspective. And yeah, we'll go over some of the simpler things. There's room here at the table if anyone wants to join me and show off any of their skills, so pipe up as well. Let's see if I can figure out the screen sharing here. So I'm going to share, I believe, just this one. It looks like that's going to share both of my monitors. So let's see here. Once again, I apologize. I'm a little underprepared here since Korvin was taking off. If anyone knows how to share just one of my screens, let me know here because it's not obvious from this cameraman here. Or what we can do is just use a single screen. How about that? Yeah, let's do that. We'll just use a single screen, and I'll try not to show you anything that you shouldn't be seeing. So I'll close all these other windows here, which you should probably do before you broadcast to the whole world. And close this down. It's just going to be a little harder for me to monitor what's going on in the other channels if I only have this one screen, but we'll go ahead and see if this fixes anything. All right, yeah, okay, we'll share the screen like that. All right. So I'm going to try to monitor the town hall channel in case anyone has any questions, but like I said, I'm doing this without a co-host today, so, and I'm not going to be able to watch the YouTube chat because I don't have enough room, but that's all right. All right, so One of the things I've been working on here is some front-end testing. There was a discussion in Slack, I think just yesterday or very recently, about the file manager not working in the latest Firefox. When you right-click on it, I think it was reported by Chris or C5DK that when you right-clicked on it, the contextual menu wasn't staying up. So this is something that's really hard to test from the unit tests that are in concrete5. So I personally don't have a test for that yet, but it's something I've been working on, is some front-end testing. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what I've been doing here, because I'm going to do a pull request and try to get this crowdsourced and see if the community can't help out with this to avoid any problems when it comes to new releases and such. So the system I've been using is Cucumber and Gherkin. And these are really nice because it allows non-technical people to help define the expected behavior of your web application of concrete5. So I'll just start by showing an example of what that looks like. I think we've got, actually, I forget what they're called now. We've got add user. Other ones? This is one. We've got another one here. Yeah, this is the simplest one. All right. So this is a Gherkin file. And basically this can be written in pretty much any widely spoken human language. It has a lot of internationalization. I've written it in English, but you're welcome to write it in any human language which is supported, because it's not a programming language. It's designed to be read by end users to clearly define how you want your web app to behave. So you can see we've got some blue keywords and some structure, but beyond that, it's pretty freeform. So this is a really simple example for concrete5. We've got a feature for logging in and here, and then you've got a little description of what that entails, which is just log into the site, followed by one or more scenarios. And what this does is forces you to clearly describe the sort of steps you would take to get to a specific state that you would want to test. So you always have some background information, well, usually, which is started with the word given. And then you'll have some description of some sort of steps or interactions which will lead to the final state you want to test. And then you'll have a statement that you actually want to test. And then this Gherkin file is parsed by Cucumber and connected with some step definition files, which actually implement the tests, and we'll run it in a browser to see if it actually works. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at how that is implemented here. So we've got step definitions and another file which is named exactly the same. This one, if you can see here, is auth_login.feature, and this one is auth_login.js. So I've been implementing this in the JavaScript API. It uses Selenium behind the scenes, so you could do it in Java, JavaScript, I think C#. There's a couple of other languages. I'm just using JavaScript just because it's front-end testing, and that just seems most logical to me. You can see here, we import some objects, which I'll explain a little bit later. I guess we can explain the first two here up at the top. So the first one is the functions provided by Cucumber, which map onto these keywords in the feature file, given, when, and then. So Cucumber is going to take whatever is after that keyword and match it to your first argument to that matching function. And you can use regular expressions. You can get a bit more complicated than this to pass in different variables, which we'll look at a bit later. But that's basically how it connects them. So it helps to kind of standardize on your language of how you're describing things. But again, they leave that up to the end user. It depends on the domain you're working in. But eventually, you'll want to standardize on how you describe things, clicking on a button rather than tapping if you're using a touch interface or something like that. But again, it's up to the community or the organization that's creating them. So you can see here, given I'm not logged in, then we have a function which is going to implement that. So this line here, it just prevents Cucumber from opening multiple browsers if there already is one. But this browser is the Selenium WebDriver, which is going to control Chrome in this case. And I'll show you a little bit later. You can see that's defined up here in this. And you can set it for, I believe you can set it up for Firefox and other browsers as well. Then what we're going to do is, if we've created a browser, if one doesn't exist, we're going to use this C5 object here and visit the site. And that is going to be defined in our site object here. So we pass in the browser here. Then we also give it the protocol, the URL, server user, and server pass if you have it behind basic auth. And the reasoning there is that's all going to be stored in the site object so that you only need to change it in one place. And again, I'll show you that a little bit later. All right, so once you've done that, after it visits the site, it's going to make this assertion here to see if you have actually loaded the site or not. And that's where the actual tests come from. Is it will grab the title. You can see here it's browser get title. And once it's got it, it will make sure that that is the same as this string here, login cats. So in previous sessions, we've created a test install called cats. And we're just going to run with that because there's at least one person whose name is Cats that listens to this, and it keeps him awake when he's listening. So hi, Cats. So that's the background. Given that's happening, then it will move on to the next step when I enter valid credentials. And again, you can see that this is abstracted into both the C5 object, which has a method which does the form login, and then passes in the browser and the site user and site password. And again, these are all stored in these special objects at the top, which is kind of what I've been working on, and will hopefully eventually make things a lot easier to write other tests for other functions in the future. So after it enters that, then the test here is then I should be authenticated. So we're going to wait for the browser to get the title, and then we're going to check to make sure it says welcome. And that only shows up if you've actually logged in. And then after that, we're just going to log out and close the browser as kind of a cleanup. And technically, this should actually be extracted into, I think there's after something like this, and you can pass in a function, something like that, and it will just run it after all the steps, but I haven't done that yet, and I haven't tested it yet, so I'm not going to do that right now because that will probably break something, but something like that. So let's take a look at how this works. So over here, we've got, let's see, I probably need to make this bigger. Okay. I don't usually use this terminal much, so there we go. That doesn't change the font size. Doing this just for you guys. I don't usually use this one here, so font size. What am I missing? Text. Oh, I see right here. Custom font. We'll make it so people can see. There we go. That's way too big. All right. So we've got this little installation here called cats, and I'm just going to run this with the PHP built-in server 7. Actually, I think I need to do this on sudo because I think I'm correctly. Okay, so I've got that running. So yeah, this is our basic composer-based concrete5 install, and I'm just using the PHP built-in server to serve it up because I'm lazy. But I have set it up so that it should work with this. So let's get another shell here. And basically to run this, you just need to type npm test and then features and auth login feature to run that feature. And hopefully this will work. So it's opening up Chrome, it's signing in, it's checking that it's signed in, and then it's closing. And then it gives you a summary here. You can see one scenario, which matches this right up here. One scenario. You see there were 3 steps that passed, which matches the steps in the scenario here. And you can see there's a total time here of 7 seconds. There's also some dots up here. Each one of those represents a step. And if they fail or they're not implemented or something, the code here will change. So that's the basic idea. Anyone have any questions so far? I don't see anyone typing here, so I don't think so, unless I'm in the wrong channel. Or maybe no one's watching. See if anyone can hear me. I'm not sure how to test. See if anyone's listening. I'll just trust that someone is there listening to me. If you are listening, jump in the Slack channel. Say hi. Yeah, so let's take a little bit deeper look at some of these objects I've been building here, which will hopefully make life easier. So if we take a look here at let's look at the side object first. Hey, Chris. Hey, John the fish. Good to see some people here. You guys can help me out because you guys know what you're doing. All right. So this is the site. This is the site object here. And so the idea here is we're just abstracting out some commonly used settings and selectors and actions so that we don't have to rewrite them in all the tests. And this will allow you to change everything in one place. So you can see right here, all it does is it creates these properties on this object, and then these get reused. Here you can see the site protocol, the URL server, things like this. So if you wanted to use the same auth login test with your site, all you'd need to do is just change the URL right there, and it should work. And we'll actually test that in a second to see if it does actually work. A more interesting one is the page object. Oops. This is, I need to make this full screen here. Whoops. This is the one where it's going to be reused a lot. This is where we get all of the selectors. So you can see here, for example, for logging in, we've got the by ID, which is provided by the Selenium WebDriver. You can see up here, const. This is provided by the Selenium WebDriver. And then we use that to select different things either by ID, by CSS, or by JavaScript. So we define that once in this object, and then you can use page.login_password to access that selector. And the reason why is, if you change the UI, you don't want to have it too brittle. I mean, it will break, but if it breaks, you can fix it in one place and it should fix all your other tests. So this eventually is going to become quite large. But what I've done so far, you can see I've just got a little bit for authentication, got a little bit for sitemap, which I'll show you in a second here. And then there's going to be a whole bunch which describe different things you can click on in the dashboard. Excuse me. Also, there's the toolbar here, and this is the one I'm sort of working on right now, is this composer stuff. So you can fill out, excuse me. So you can fill out composer-based forms and make pages and test making pages and stuff. Does that kind of make sense so far? It will be available, Thomas J. It's yeah, it's recording and you can watch it afterwards, or you can put it on excuse me, you can put it on double speed and catch up. Because most of the things I talked about was just Korvin not being here. Yeah, so a lot of it, a lot of these selectors actually require JavaScript because a lot of them are using this contains function in jQuery, which I found works much easier than targeting a specific ID, because a lot of the IDs are quite generic, and then there's just this long path. And it turns out it's much easier if you can just target the content of a link, for example. So I narrow it down to a specific ID, and at the end of this untitled list of search navigation, there's a whole bunch of A elements, and so then it just searches them for the one that says add user. So this will need to be as this grows, this will need to be internationalized, or only test on English or something. But it turns out that it's just easier to target the content of a lot of these. There is another way to do it where you can integrate into the templates a bit more. You can add data attributes to make it easier to target these, but we don't have it yet. So this is an interim step here. Another, so basically the page object I'm trying to build is just describing where things are clicked on the page. Another object I'm building here is the concrete5 object. Oops. I hope you don't hear all those beeps every time my computer beeps on me. The concrete5 object, and this is trying to describe actions that you would do with concrete5. So you can see there's this action for logging in and logging out. And basically, it's kind of a shortcut, and it will use the page object and selectors and the site object and the configuration there to do these sort of things. So, almost all of your tests, like all of your tests for the dashboard, they'll involve logging in. So you can just call c5.action_login, pass in the driver, and it will take care of that for you, because that's usually going to be in one of the given statements, which again I'll show you in just a second. So those are the main ones. There's also this browser one where you can set, if you want to use a different browser. Right now it's using Chrome in incognito mode, but you can set that for whatever you like. All right, so let's look at a slightly more sophisticated test. Yeah, Thomas J, no problem. It'll be there forever and for always. Let's look at a slightly more sophisticated one. So one thing I've been doing is creating a few features which will test the dashboard. So one thing we want to do is make sure that the sitemap loads quickly. So we've got this feature file here, and the feature is testing the sitemap load speed. The sitemap and the nodes should load quickly. So this one is a little bit more sophisticated because it's got a background step, which basically means that this given step is going to be incorporated in both of the following scenarios. And the given state is that you're logged in with Access Sitemap, and that's where we're going to use that shortcut of c5 login or whatever it was, can't remember. But once you're logged in, then we're going to test two different things. One, we're going to test the speed of opening the sitemap, and the other one, we're going to test the speed of opening a sitemap node. And on small sites, this is probably not a problem, but on larger sites with hundreds or thousands of pages, this had been an issue in the past. So we just want to make sure that the user experience is reasonable. And so we're going to create some tests on this and make sure that nothing we do slows that down. So in this first scenario, given you're logged in, when you click on the sitemap, then you should see the sitemap load within 5 seconds. And that's pretty generous, and we can play around with that. And then another one, we do basically the same things. Given you're logged in, given you've clicked on the sitemap, when you click on a sitemap node, then the node itself should load within 5 seconds. So let's take a look at how that would be implemented. So just let me know if these fonts are too small here. So same thing as before, we're just going to import these objects from Cucumber and from our utilities here. And then we also just have a variable here where we're just going to record the start time for timing these things. So here's the background situation. Given I'm logged in as a user with access to the site, access to the sitemap. So we're going to start the browser. We're going to visit the page. We're going to check to make sure that we're actually there. And then we're going to do the form login. And actually, we can simplify that because I think there's, the action login. Yeah, we could actually replace that with action login, because action login actually does both of these steps. So I can simplify this further. It visits and then does the form login. So there's, get rid of those. I think the reason why I didn't combine them is because I wanted to also do the tests, the assertions there. But if you've got that set somewhere else, you only really need to test it once. I'm just learning as I'm going here. So that gets us to a state where we are logged in at the dashboard. And then when I click on the sitemap, so we're going to go to that URL there. And this is another thing where we'll probably want to put this into the page object or the C5 object so that we don't have to have the explicit path there. But again, this is alpha, alpha version 1. But you'll get the idea here. And then, yeah, once it loads, we're going to wait for the title to be full sitemap. And then, let's see, if I remember correctly, yeah, So the sitemap loads asynchronously. So the page loads first. You get the title full sitemap. Then we're going to start the timer here. And then sitemap will load asynchronously. So then we're going to wait until we see it, which is this here. And this is where that pages object comes in really handy, because it's really hard to target some of the things on the sitemap. But once you've found it, you plug it in there once and you can reuse it everywhere. So this selector is only true when there's actually a sitemap with some nodes in there. So once that is seen, then it will stop the timer. Right now, I'm going to console log it just to show it. There's probably a better way to do it. And then we're going to make the assertion that it took less than the max seconds. So this is an interesting example of how we can get information from here. So we have this set as 5 seconds. And if you look over here, we've got a string, but we've also got this parameter here. We're expecting a float value. And so it will grab that value from the feature file, and then it will pass it to the function here. And then we've got it used, got it used here for assertion. So if it fails that, it will say the sitemap took too long to load. And then we've got the cleanup here, which again, that should probably be in the after function. But the same thing for this map node. It's basically just going to go through the same steps, and the only difference is we're going to, this time, we're going to wait until the sitemap nodes are expanded already, which was in the previous one. That's what we were testing. Then after we've seen that, then we'll start logging time and wait until, or sorry, I think I'm reading this too quickly. That's right here. We're going to wait until the sitemap has an open node. And I think this is how many we're looking for, so at least one. This is the shortcut I've made in the C5 object. Then once we get this right here, the sitemap nodes are expanded, then we'll stop and we'll test it. So let's take a look at that in action. So if we come here to our shell again, this time we'll run the dashboard sitemap load feature. And once again, this is going to run actually these 2 scenarios. And each time it's going to log in, run the test, and log out. So you'll see 2 browser windows open. Okay, so you can see in the bottom right here, the sitemap loaded in 176 milliseconds, and the sitemap node loaded in 309 milliseconds. So what's useful here is you can change this just here. Let's say we want the sitemap to load in 0.1 seconds. So then if you just run that again, it'll fail unless suddenly it's become really fast all of a sudden. You can see it has an F there for fail in the bottom right. The second one passed. So when you get failing tests, it will give you a little summary here, and it details the steps that it went through. So not everything failed. It did get through the given and the win, but the assertion was wrong. You can see there's the error there. The sitemap took too long to load. So we can use that, to make sure. Sorry, that might be a bit too small. Sitemap took too long to load. So we can use that to test, the performance of concrete5 to make sure we haven't done anything that's dramatically slowed things down. And similarly, we can test the file manager interface that when you right-click on something, there should be a contextual menu that pops up, and it should stay popped up. So you can test to make sure that an element is visible. It's actually really nice because it's it's controlling the browser as a user. So if you tell it to click on something like this dashboard thing over here, you can hide this sidebar. And if you tell it to click on this sitemap link here, but the bar is not actually visible, it's in the DOM. You could select it and click it with jQuery, but because it's not visible to the end user, it'll throw an error saying that it's not clickable, and it will state that it's not findable, it's not clickable. So it really does emulate an end user. That making sense so far? Yeah, Chris. So there's I know Andrew's been sort of wishing for this sort of thing for a couple of years now. There is a lot of unit tests and integration tests in concrete5, but this is the sort of thing that's been lacking. And so I'd already done a little bit of this in my previous job, just kind of a hobby more like. So yeah, this is what I've been focusing a little bit of my time on, and we'll be focusing some more. So I'm hoping, as I mentioned at the beginning, that I'm hoping at least to add the feature files to the core so that we can crowdsource writing the descriptions of how concrete5 should behave in general, so that we all have the same expectations of the interactions and the behavior. And then at a minimum, that'll get us all on the same page as to what we would expect. And then yeah, once I can get this, I can add that as well, the concrete5 object and the page object. I think that's sort of the key, is once we can load that up with sort of all the selectors and actions we need to abstract out the concrete5 dashboard and the experience, then it should be relatively quick to write tests to test all the functionality, and hopefully avoid breaking things. I know, like recently, in one of the latest versions, there's a new problem which I don't think anyone noticed, and probably might not notice. But if you go to the versions of a page, oh, you can't do it from here. If you visit a page and you click on the versions, and there won't be any here because this is a fresh install, but let's say you had 20 different versions, then you'll have the paging interface here, so you can click older and view versions 1 through 10, and newer to click versions 20 through 11, something like that. I believe in one of the latest versions of concrete5, that paging interface broke, but no one noticed it because it's probably not used very often. But it is something surely we could catch, with front-end testing. It's probably incredibly difficult to test any other way. So hopefully, yeah, this will bring some extra, I don't know, not security, but extra confidence in releasing new versions of concrete5. So that's a really good question, John the Fish, is how robust is it? So that's the main reason for making these objects here with the selectors. So this is the concrete5 object and the actions. The UI doesn't change very often, but if it does, then theoretically we should just be able to change it in one place. So like if that paging, the versions paging interface was somehow changed and the selector changed or something, then ideally we just need to change it here in this big object of selectors. And if all the tests reference that, page dot version history dot or underscore newer or underscore older, if we just fix that in one place, then hopefully that's the idea, is that uh, it'll work. I guess the question is how do we maintain, I guess, do we need to test old versions? Well, I guess we don't really need to test old versions, because you could just check out the older version of the test and run it against the older version, rather than build in some sort of checking to see what sort of version of concrete5 you're running. But yeah, I mean, it's something to think about if we're maintaining support for older versions or something. Yeah, it's a good question. If you've got thoughts, I'm open to it. I'm like I said, I'm learning this as I go. I've been watching some videos and reading some articles on best practices, and this has been refactored a dozen times. So yeah, if you got any ideas or suggestions. This is actually taking longer than I thought it would. So let's move on to the one more example here, which is, what was I working on here? Oh yeah, add user. So this is one I was working on just this week. So say you want to add a new user. Actually, this is good. We'll sort of walk this through both. So for an end user, non-technical user, if you can train them in these keywords and thinking sort of logically, they can help write these. And they can do it by actually interacting with the site. So say they want to test adding a new user to the site, given you're logged in, which we've already done, and have permission to add a new user. So you need to check here and go to members. And actually, I think you just check to make sure that once you open the sidebar here that it says members, because if you don't have permission to add members, I don't think you see that at all. So that's the background information. And then when you click, let's see, when I open the add user interface, so that's intentionally kind of vague because there are probably multiple ways to do it, but you click add user here, and then you get this form. So when I fill out the form with username, password, and email address, which is these three here, and then you can add other options if you want it as well, and submit the form, you should have a new user created. This one uses, up here, before we've had scenarios, and so each one would be called scenario. This one is actually scenario outline, which allows us to use this examples table here. So you can actually have, you use the same test with slightly different variables. So for example, say you have several groups in the lower left here, administrators, editors, viewers. You'd probably want to test making each one of those users as part of your larger testing regime of permissions and things like that. So you could add another column here, groups, and should be administrators. And you could have another test user, name 2, password 2, apply, example, and then the editors group. And what that does is that will pass each one of the values here to the function that implements these as these 3 parameters, which is kind of cool. You can also do it when filling out a form. You can add the table sort of, you can add a table like right here, field type value, which is what I have. Let's see here. If you look at what I have here for concrete5, you can see down here for composer, I've got composer input, which is just text input. I've got composer content, which is like the rich text content editor. And then I've got Composer Fancy Tree. So when you're selecting groups, tags, things like that. Then I've also got, this is the kind of complicated one. This is the kind of complicated one here, which is interacting with the file manager. So you can just pass it, you call this c5.form underscore file manager search and pass the driver in a search string, and it will search that for you. And then you can use this one with the file manager select to select one of the results. Yeah, so that's what the type is here. So you might have an input here. You might have another field. The field would be called description. So this is a composer-based form that you've set up for a page type, and that might be and then you put your value here. Description about myself. I'm not actually sure how you would handle raw HTML, if that'll work or not. I'll figure that out. It's not quite a YAML file, but I know you can put in, actually, I know you can put in doc strings. So I think you can actually put in something like that, and then in between you can actually put in a Markdown or raw HTML or something like that, and it will pass it into the function for you. But yeah, just as an example, name, my name. So if you do that, it'll also pass it in as a data table, and so you can use that to specify the forms. I guess I should specify here. When you're using a table like this will pass these values into the function which implements this specific step for a specific scenario. But if you're doing a scenario outline, that will use the examples table to create multiple scenarios. So these are slightly different. And I'm not going to try to show you both at the same time right now because I don't know how well they play together. But let's try this one. So I've implemented this as well. Step definitions add user. It's not quite working yet, but you can just see how it works here. So given I'm logged in, this one uses the action login because I'm not going to test anything. I'm not going to test that the site loaded and then log in. I'm just going to have it log in. So it uses all the settings from the different objects and it just logs in, and then I just test to make sure that it's actually logged in. And then it's going to test to make sure we have permission to add a new user, which again is just making sure that that members link appears on the sidebar there. And this part is the part that it's a little bit crunchy because I think this depends on your window width, when you log in, whether this shows by default when you log in. So I've commented that out for now. And if I show you this, we might want to make this a bit bigger so that it does show up. And then you can see here, we're going to open the add user interface, which again, since I'm just working on this, I actually have a bit more explicit here than I would like, but it's not too bad. But here's the example of using this table is you can see in the string here, it specifies the type of data that you're expecting, and then it will pass them into the function here, and then you can use them here. So I'm just, let's see, actually I loaded up here. I just create an object with those, and I'm just going to iterate through the object. And just use the yeah, I'm still working on this one. This is just find element. Members as basic utility. Yeah. Not sure if this actually works yet. I think it does because I think it's using these right here as the values. Yeah, let's give it a try. I'm not sure. I was working on this late last night, so it might not work. Let's close this first, get rid of that, and take a look. So it's going to open the browser, going to log in, and it checks, and yay, it worked a little bit. Okay, okay, I see what it's doing. This is a good explanation. All right, so you can see it did it twice, and that's because we have two entries in here. So it treats them as two completely different scenarios. It didn't actually fill in the information. That's the part I'm having a problem with, is actually passing that stuff in. It's telling me what's wrong right here. And I thought I was doing it correctly, but not doing it correctly. But you can see when it fails, it just goes on to the next one. Let's look at the whole thing here. You can see it's actually giving the status of U, which means unimplemented. And so it's saying that if you want to implement this, what you need to do, this is what's really nice about the feature files, is if you have someone write the feature files for you and then you run the feature file without any step definitions, it'll give you a stub here, which you can just copy and paste and then fill it in. So you can see it's yellow here, so it's not that great. Let me copy this here. There we go. So it gives you a stub, so you don't have to rewrite all that stuff. And if you return the string pending, it recognizes that and it will run the test successfully and then give you a P instead of a U. Up here where it has this capital U here, it will just say P and note that it's pending. So you can actually build out all the tests without actually implementing them first, to sort of see what sort of coverage you have. And there's a lot you can do with, I haven't gotten into it yet, but there's a lot you can do with running it headless. You can take screenshots along the way, and I'm pretty sure there's a way where you can do a diff of the screenshots. So if you're running in a headless mode, you take a screenshot and you can set specific screenshots as a sort of the expected look, and then subsequently, when you run it headless, it'll take screenshots and it will diff the screenshot. And if something has changed, I believe, I haven't set it up yet, but I believe it'll highlight the part of the image that has changed, which is really useful. Because with concrete5, there's all the different possible interactions that we should be testing for as thousands, more than thousands. So yeah, this is just the beginning. What I've been working on. I wanted to just try here is see. Go to concrete5.org/trial. If you don't know about this, this is a really great way to just set up a real quick installed test. And I think this is actually going to create a user for me, isn't it? Check to just use me. Let's see if this works. Probably have to do all these things here, so this might not be a good demo. Whenever I do these captures, yeah, it's gonna ask me to do these for like 5 minutes. Anyway, what I was going to show is you can use that trial to make a really quick, clean, minimal install, and then you could change the site object to whatever the new URL is that it gave to you, because it creates a little unique URL for each of the installs, because I think they delete themselves after 7 or 14 days. But like, if you're having a problem with permissions or, some complicated setup, you can do that clean install. You can do most things except for installing new packages, and you could set it all up, and then you could run your tests against a clean install to sort of isolate where your problem is as part of troubleshooting. But I guess I can't show you that right now. So yeah, that's it as far as what I've done with front-end testing. I'd really love any sort of feedback you have or ideas. I'm going to talk to Andrew and Korvin about at least adding the feature files and maybe some of the objects that I've created to abstract out concrete5 and the page and stuff to the repo. I don't know if they'll want it as maybe a separate project or something, but yeah, I would really like to get some community involvement on it if possible. Because yeah, I think it's sort of one of the big missing pieces to give us the confidence to release new versions. So yeah, that's about it. Sorry that Korvin is not here. I'm admittedly much less competent in concrete5 than Korvin is, so if you have really technical questions, I can't answer them. I give you a try. I could try, but probably send you to Korvin for really technical ones about when to use a facade and when not to, because I don't know myself. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Someone's watching. So yeah, just if you have any ideas how to make this better, potential pitfalls in the future, like John the Fist was mentioning, we got to make sure this is robust against core versions and updates. If I'm overlooking something or oversimplifying something, or if you have an idea of something critical that should be added to these tests straight away, let me know. And yeah, I'll try to either get it as a separate project under concrete5 or add it to the whole concrete5 project on GitHub as soon as possible. I know Katz has been asking about this as well, and Franz really wants this as well. I demoed this to Franz and Andrew this week, and they were really excited to see this getting off the ground. So yeah, if there are no other questions, I can see John the Fish is typing something, so I'll wait just a second to see if there's anything. Yeah, thanks everyone for showing up. We'll tie Korvin up and make sure he can be here next time. He had a scheduling conflict, so we'll try to avoid that next time. Just to, I think John the Fish has a really deep philosophical question that he's composing here. Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. Keep it abstract enough that it can be used for packages as well, or yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe have a core part which can be used in packages and projects, and then a more specific part for parts of concrete5, like the dashboard or composer or something. That's also a good idea. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. John, I can add you to the yeah, next time I'll add you so that you can talk here. Looks like that's the end of our time though, so I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thanks everyone for joining. We're holding these twice a month, second and fourth Tuesday. So the next one is going to be, or sorry, I just said Tuesday, Thursday. Next one is going to be June 6th, unless there's some holiday that I'm missing. June 6th, June 20th, and then July 11th, July 25th. So yeah, please join us next time. And if you have any questions or suggestions for next time, pop them in this channel, or yeah, contact Korvin or me, and we'll try to deal with it. Thanks very much, everybody.